Greetings, fellow travelers, explorers, independent thinkers, and seekers alike. And welcome to the Ancient Amnesia Podcast, in collaboration with the Nexus NexCast, focusing on prophets and prophecies. In this episode, we'll be examining the work of Madame Blavatsky. Grab your favorite libation, get into your comfy spot, and enjoy the conversation.
All right. So thank you, everybody, for staying with us. I hope you are enjoying the content. Let us know what you think. Please do. We really appreciate your feedback. Also, I'm going to plug Robert. Go to the Nexus NexCast. Check his work out. Robert, quickly tell people where they can find you so that they can hear your ramblings as well.
Well, I'm in the transition of new format, new website, and new content. What we're seeing here is part of the way the new content is going to be rolled out, so it's kind of a little test and taste and tease, if you will. So right now, Bauer.media is where both the Nexus and my voiceover work. Then there's the Nexus NexCast on Facebook, and you'll find all the new stuff coming up there. Yeah, I'm trying to swim to the next week or so to get the first stuff out. So I'm hoping that's what's going to happen. But in the meantime, we can talk about some prophecy and some of the ideas about when you think about the idea of predicting the future. By the way, do you have the screen there? Is everything showing up?
I think it looks great. I think everybody can see it.
So the whole idea, and to me, this is a dangling chad. It is a component to the consciousness, to that which is where all comes from, the source of the force that guides your course. So this is one aspect, which is prediction, which is being able to, see and think and feel and experience ahead of where you are having that experience, which is kind of, when you think about it, it's kind of oxymoronic, because every second that you are in consciousness, you are moving into the future. Each thing is the future happening, unfolding, and when it's done, it's the past. So are you really ever in a present that is not moving forward, ergo always turning into the future? So when you think about it simplistically, regardless of the nanoness of how you delineate that time experience within your mind, you're always making a prediction. You're always anticipating what you think you're going to think or do or whatever, right?
Well, and on another note, with it, that's kind of in that film, is that everything is in the imagination, and everything is actually a kind of like, before you do anything, you think of the future of you doing it. You imagine the scenario, and then you basically create what I would call a self-prophecy that you then fulfill, right? And you say, you wake up and you reboot, right? Your mind goes through this process of rebooting. Where was I? Like, who am I, right? You come out of that dream state, which we can get into, that relates to maybe some of this. But you come out of that, you reboot, and then you cast your mind forward, right? Everything starts in the imagination before it then becomes action. So you're taking the imagination and you're projecting into the future, and then you're fulfilling that imaginatory world. And that's basically how you decide to do anything. Isn't that right?
I take that view. To me, you create your future by thinking of what it is, right? Now, we can go deep into that rabbit hole, and and it's related, but it's not to the point that I wanted to go with this particular segment. And there's a specific point that's related to the overall thing that we were just talking about, which is this predictive nature of consciousness. We exist in a predictive state. Our linguistics predict it, going back to the whole idea of language is your operating system for the biochemical spiritual Uber that you have assigned yourself to and are now taking on this ride. One of the interesting aspects about that is how far into the future you can look. Goes back to the whole idea of this non-local consciousness, the concept of remote viewing, the spirituality of astral travel and Akashic access, and the expanse, if you will, of the knowledge of in consciousness that can be not only explored but used. Okay, psychics and people who have clairaudience, clairvoyance, is some kind of omnivance from the standpoint of just knowing. There's a whole lot of records of it and a whole lot of data. And the interesting thing is when the data is so separated by so much, yet is so accurate by so much, you have to sit there and take note. You have to go, how did somebody 200 years ago predict what's happening right now? How did somebody see such a detailed set of specifics about a certain event and be so accurate and have done it so long ago? That's the kind of stuff that makes you go,
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, and I think Blavatsky is an interesting case because, I mean, and another thing is that it seems to that some of this stuff didn't happen so recent. I mean, Blavatsky, we're talking about 1850s, I mean, this woman was born in Russia. I mean, she was not exposed to any type of information so much that you would think that she would be able to get into these things. And the story is that she went to Tibet and she started learning from these particular masters of ancient wisdom. And you got to think, and this is back in the 1850s, you have pretty old traditions happening there in Tibet at the time, and you have probably some seriously kind of like tucked in secrets there. And there apparently was some material, a book that particularly was said to not ever be able to be torn nor burned nor destroyed, that was given by the masters that aren't from this world to mankind, of the truths that are beyond anything that we know of today. This kind of universal truth, this truth that was universal, and this is how she then formed her book, The Secret Doctor. She was bringing that same information back in, and if you actually read this stuff, it's actually unbelievable. I mean, she predicted the atom as being a multitude of parts compared to this one singular thing, compared to what the science was saying at the day as they just discovered it. So some of this stuff is incredibly scientific and very, very accurate. And how was she doing this? What exactly were these people tapping into to gain knowledge of the universe to this type of degree? I mean, it's fascinating.
Well, the the story of who she is as a person. I mean, she had telekinesis capabilities. She wasn't just someone who tapped into the ancient teachings. She had the skills that were amplified in her existence. Okay, and this is one of the things that, just to go back to the opening point I was making about why I wanted to take a look at prophecy, is the fact that you can intentionally set your initial. Okay, let me back up. Everybody has psychic ability. It's a natural part of consciousness. But just like any other skill set, everybody's born with varying degrees innately within the construct of the package you Uber, okay? It comes with the ability, with psychic ability, psychic awareness. And some have really strong heightened capabilities. Others don't. So it's like any other skill set, any other capability, any other attribute that is unique and profound and unexplained within the human experience. So what she had,
Yeah, absolutely.
and she was one of those that you could, pick your term. She was one who possessed the capabilities that were beyond just being a psychic or just being a mystic, just being a shaman, okay? Whatever delineation of experiencing knowledge outside of one's space and place, accessing the Akashic, if you will. So she created the Theosophical Society that was an amalgamation of various different teachings that she had not only gone and traveled, as you mentioned, to Tibet, but that she was also receiving as her own downloads, because she was already in that. She had a more powerful connection. And I think, just by way of example, savants are another example of a natural connection to this cosmic consciousness where all exists and all can be, because they for whatever reason,
Right.
the frequencies that they can channel or attach or become one with, however you want to describe it, they can resonate in those frequencies, and ergo it manifests naturally. And that is profound.
Yeah, I think that there's a matrix to our minds, to the point of there's an ability to cultivate particular extrasensory perception to a degree of refinement that would make you adept into not just channeling some of this information, but being able to actually use it, and be able to manipulate it in a certain way. And I think in her case, she was talking about how she all of this stuff came to her in a pure vision, and she was using her vision, her ability to receive imagery and information that was showing her the truth, as opposed to her, it was beyond this idea of like learning. It wasn't the idea of she was reading information that was given to her. She was learning how to use these particular extrasensory perceptive abilities that were cultivated for 1,000 years in these Tibetan regions. And in that, she was able to pull this information out and then talk about it. And then, like you said, as things went forward, she was proved correct as time went on. Like these things that were seemingly weird back in the day, now it was like, wow, she was right about this stuff.
Well, and this, I'll just read this little piece here about, how what she saw and thought of is the origin of species, which ties back into what we were talking about a minute ago. So Blavatsky stated Aryan root race was 1 million years old. She meant that the souls of the people that later physically incarnated as the first Aryans about 100,000 years ago and began to incarnate in bodies of Atlanteans 1 million years ago. So the Theosophists believed the Aryan root race was physically progenited by the Valasvadu Manu, one of the masters of the ancient wisdom. The Aryan race is white because it was generated from a specific tribe of the fourth original Semite subrace of the Atlanteans that was white and lived in the mountains of southeastern Atlantis. Closest relatives today to this tribe are the Basques. And there's, again, going back to what we were talking about with the Human Genome Project, the Basques are a unique and curious bunch that can't be explained, at least to this point. So the bards of the new white race poetically described Aryans as being moon-colored. This is an Aryan root race thus, the Aryan root race overlapped the fourth, or Atlantean root race, and the first beginnings of the fifth root race were approximately toward the end of the time during which the fourth root race dwelt in Atlantis, and a small band of only 9,000 people, constituting the then small Aryan root race, migrated out of Atlantis in 79,797 BC. Really?
Yeah, that's fascinating. Huh? It kind of sounds like a little Toba time period too there, Robert.
What do you think?
I mean, it's fascinating. I mean, you have a lot of things packed in right there. You have a little bit of blend coming from this catastrophic stuff that we talked about earlier in the segment. But yeah, I mean, this also ties into some of the Indian Vedic scripture stuff that I talked about with Krima, and that you did have these kind of migrations, these other races that were coming out of these areas. Very, very fascinating. But again, like, as you have to understand that this is written down in the 1850s. Okay, I mean, what access of information? What information did a woman in Russia in 1850 have? I mean, what type of knowledge was she capable of accessing?
Right.
I mean, that's one thing you have to consider when you look at the information that's coming out of Blavatsky, is that it is so far advanced and beyond anything. And I do want to say that, and I don't want to go on into a huge tangent, because this will be fascinating and it will lead us into, but in this particular period, I find that from 1850 to about 1930, there seems to have almost been like a portal that opened. And you have people that are incredible in all different types of fields, right? You have your Teslas, you have your Krishnamurtis, you have your Walter Russells, you have
John
your
Keeley,
all the scientists, right? You've got Steiner, you've got Max Planck, and all the scientist guys that were highly philosophical. I mean, you seem to have had something. Manly P. Hall came out of this period. There seemed to have been some type of ancient influence and modern blooming, like intellectual blooming that happened, but it was very esoteric, and the knowledge that was coming from these people was incredibly deep and revealing. I mean, what's going on with that, Robert?
I completely agree. I mean, when you look at, if you go back to the early 1900s, so like the 1810 and 20, you have some very curious developments that happen. One of them, Walter Bosley does an outstanding job getting into, is the Sonoro Aero Club. And what appears to be some technology that came from some German science enthusiasts who came over to America and actually built flying machines that weren't blimps. They had their own etheric type of power. They traveled around. They did all kinds of stuff. And from then, I mean, that's when you get photography all of a sudden shows up. You can start taking pictures. You've got the rail and all those things that come along. But once you get into about 1850, there's this explosion of stuff that all of a sudden, from an industrial age perspective, starts taking form. You know, starts coming to be and starts being put in use. An interesting couple of additional nuggets is it seems also during this period, from somewhere like right after the founding of the United States, so around 1790 through somewhere around 1850, there seems to be evidence of a reset, of a mud flood, of a relocation of peoples and stuff. So I don't know if there's any correlation there, but the interesting thing about Blavatsky and eventually Steiner, but particularly what
Manly P. Hall. I mean,
well, particularly what Blavatsky did, and I'm focusing on her because one of the aspects of her story is she was so good at what she did, and it was everything: telekinesis, psychokinesis, telepathy, whatever she did. She was acknowledged by people who participated in it with her as being a badass. Okay. So she went to the mystery schools where some of the nuggets, the most important nuggets of knowledge, have been not only hidden but protected and preserved. She went to them and said, you know, basically, I want to join and be a part. And they're like, we don't have chicks here. And regardless how good you are. And so she threatened to start releasing the knowledge that she knew, which is what became the secret doctrine. So she was so good at what she did, you know, she was a threat to the rest of the schools. Simultaneously going on at the same time was the whole issue of secularism was challenging the entire, or science, secularism through science was challenging the entire theological structure. So they were
that's true. I mean, at that
right?
time, that was whenever you had science really making its slice to split from religion in the hardest sense, right? I mean, you really had science. I mean, they were very incredibly aggressive. And, you know, kind of sinister in a way. I mean, when you look at some of the stuff that's going on, like they were doing stuff that really wasn't, they weren't playing fair. They were making a lot of assumptions. They were trying to kind of concrete some of these ideas without a lot of, stable information. And I feel like this is where kind of the science and religion schism started, was in this time period. But she was also very scientific, in the sense to where, like, her idea of this stuff was a hidden science, that this was what we could maybe call a soft science, right? A science that was beyond sensory, normal sensory abilities. And so, you know, that's what I find fascinating about her. But, you know, as you're, you know, looking into this information, she's talking about how America apparently in her lore is where this new evolution, one of these new people, is evolved people are coming out of, and I find that fascinating, because look what's in the 21st century, she says, and what's happening with us today. Like we're mixing, and all this information's coming in, and we're all going through these growing pains and trying to come to this new idea of ourselves. I think that's what's happening, and that's what's so hard. is to challenge the things that we've built to create something new, and we're having a hard time can integrate so much information, and there's a lot of falsity, and there's a lot of bad stuff out there, and people that are trying to keep us ignorant and stupid, and so we're also learning how to challenge that. But it's all there. Blavatsky is talking about what's happening today in 1850. Incredible.
For more great content, visit ancientamnesia.com and nexusnexcast.com. See you on the other side.